Welcome to Authors Alcove. I am your host, Agnes Wolfe. Today, I have spirit doula and author Kim Colella. Her book, Spirit Embraced, a guiding memoir for a life authentic and free, won a 2020 Nautilus Award and a 2021 American Book Fest Award. Her purpose is to assist others to move with courage and grace through life's many challenges and transitions, and has followed her spirit's urging to places beyond her familiar. She ministered to both the elderly and teens as a Jesuit volunteer, traveled to Calcutta to meet and experience the work of Mother Teresa, joined a delegation of women to witness the AIDS pandemic in South Africa, designed and implemented a peace program for her son's inner city public school, and assisted over 25 women in giving birth and helped others prepare for their deaths. She has lots of experience. These experiences have fostered her deep awe and respect for each phase of life. So today we'll be talking about honoring our needs, moving beyond resistance, and just trusting ourselves. So we have someone very wise here. Thank you for joining me, Kim.
Thank you so much, Agnes.
I would love to know just a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to, particularly with this particular book.
Well, this book was something that was an urging from my spirit. I resisted it. When my son was preparing to go off to college, I started asking myself about a year before he left, year and a half, 2 years, what am I going to do when he leaves? And that energy opens up in me that's been filled with being mom. How do I want to fill that space? Because, um, wherever there's a void, it likes to get filled, and we can either fill it consciously or it'll get filled with something else. So I started asking that question, and I kept hearing back, right. And I kept saying, I'm not a writer, right. I wasn't an English major, right. And it was persistent for months. And finally, one day in meditation, I said, what am I supposed to write about? And what I heard back was tell the stories that long to be told. And that shifted everything for me, because then it became it became a legacy project. What did I want to leave behind? What were the stories at the end of my life that I wanted to be sure had been recorded to share with my son, 20 years from now, if he's wondering, who was my mom besides mom? I have a daughter of the heart in Lesotho, Africa, and I wanted them recorded for her. She lives in a very patriarchal society and is told a lot what she has to do and who it is to be a faithful person. And I wanted her and the women of Lesotho to have another voice coming at them. So that was really those two, my son Sam and my daughter of the heart Mary. They were the impetus for writing the book. And then as I started writing, I realized this is bigger than them. And because for 40 years I have sought out masters in the areas of psychology and quantum physics and all sorts of healing, and I had collected these tools of transformation that I used to shift the paradigm of my own life and to create a life beyond my dreams as a young child, what I hoped for in a family. Um, I wanted to share those with the world. So that's the story of my book.
One thing that really caught my attention of what you were just saying is that you were saying that you have surrounded yourself. And that was something that I also caught from just looking up your bio and all of that is you're very intentional on who you surround yourself with. Well, who are some of the people who have had a profound impact on you?
Oh, so many. David Spangler, who taught the first two courses in my Masters of Spirituality course at Seattle University. He's a New Age philosopher, and he was one of the most holy beings I ever met. I watched him. Seattle University is a Catholic university, and so there were a lot of people who were connected to religious institutions mainline religious institutions. And here comes this New Age philosopher into this classroom where there were people as young as in their 20s and as old as in their late 70s. And he was just presenting his beliefs without needing to push it on anybody and without needing to apologize or dim it in any way. And I'd watch him and think, I want to know how to do that. I want to know how to just be so comfortable with who I am and what I believe that I don't need to convince anybody, but I also don't need to hide it. So I loved that about David. And plus some of the things he talked about the immunity system. And I remember driving home, having fireworks, it felt like going off in my head, making all these connections on a personal, community, and global level to what he was saying. So, and it was in his class that I was moved to start my own business, and then my name was born from that class. So he was really instrumental. And Jean Houston, who's considered the grandmother of the humanistic psychology movement, who's just an iconic human, who's had so many unbelievable experiences. I still study with Jean whenever I get the chance. I have to save up to do it. But she's in her 80s now, so I try now to do something with her whenever I can, because her time on the planet is shrinking, right? So those two, and then people who are less well known, but there's a community called L'Arche, which is a community of people with developmental disabilities and those who choose to live with them as family. And I've been connected to that community since 1988, 87. And those core members, the people with developmental disabilities, whether they had Down syndrome or some type of brain trauma or whatever, they taught me about living and loving and not being self-conscious and greeting people with abandon, being vulnerable. When I started hanging out at L'Arche's, just going there to visit, it soon became my second home because it modeled for me who I wanted to be and the kind of people I wanted to be around.
I can see that definitely. So you actually work as a spirit doula. I'm not actually familiar what that is. Can you describe that for me?
Sure. I made up the term for myself. So that's why. So for 35 years, I was a massage therapist and I was doing all kinds of healing work. And then people started asking me to be at their births. And then I started being at deaths. And the term, when people would say, so what do you do? And I'd say, I do massage therapy. It felt like taking a picture of my big toe and saying, this is who I am. It just didn't feel like it encapsulated. And then I was doing coaching work, and then I was an author and photographer, all these things. So spirit doula felt like that encompasses. That is a title I can grow more and more into, and that embodies who I am right now. So that's why I created that, and my focus as a spirit doula is to assist people in birthing their spirit more fully into the world, who they authentically are, not who people want them to be, but who they are, and bringing that forward. Because I believe the more we shine our unique light, the better the world will be. That's how we were created, right? So why would we be anything other than that?
I really resonate with that because I know one of the main themes in my own counseling sessions is to trust myself, because apparently, as I grew up, and I think this happens to most people, is I was trained not to trust myself, to always look outward, to figure out what is true, what is not, and to not trust my own feelings, not trust my own opinions, not trust my own thoughts. So in what ways have you had to learn to trust yourself, and what ways would you try to encourage others to learn how to trust themselves?
Oh, that's a good question. So, one of the things that really amplified that journey, growing up Catholic and in the Christian tradition, there's a thing called original sin, right? And that can easily be construed to mean we came into the world somehow imperfect and flawed. Um, but one of my very wise bosses, after being at my first birth, I went into his office and said, I don't get this thing about original sin, because there's no way that baby came into the world flawed. And he, Ben Grismer, said, Kim, original sin, we all come into the world perfect and in the image and likeness of God. But we're born into imperfect households. We have imperfect parents. We have an imperfect school system, and so original sin eventually enters all of our lives, and it enters our life the moment we learn and take in that we have to earn our love, when in fact we're lovable just because of who we are. And then we spend our whole life trying to unlearn that, right? So I was in my 20s when he told me that, and that resonated so deeply into what I knew from my experience of being with children. So I began then to start to unlearn anything that told me I was not worthy, anything that told me I was not lovable, anything that told me I was my worst moment. And I grew up in a paradigm where we were our worst moment. And if we tried to do something good, we were being a hypocrite, because this is who we really were, right? So that was a big unlearning and unraveling, to come to love myself, to trust myself, and then all sorts of things along the way that I believe that when you really listen to your spirit, it will ask you to do preposterous things that seem impossible or ridiculous. Like for me, writing this book, right? Seemed ridiculous at the time. But eventually it gained energy and became something. And when it won a Nautilus Award, I've just got to tell you, I just wept, because I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe an outside body that's so respected said this is a book worth reading. So that, and going to Calcutta to meet Mother Teresa and to see her work, that experience, every step of the way, unbelievable things happened to make that dream happen and to follow that voice.
And from what I understand, the core message that you have in this book is to trust that quiet voice within yourself. And
Yes.
how do you help others find that quiet voice? People who have not learned to listen to themselves, who have always been looking outward for guidance rather than looking within.
Well, I teach them things like how to ground their energy, how to rely on their inner voice, as well as the support systems on the spiritual plane, as well as the physical plane. I encourage them to surround themselves with people who are living the life the way they are living their life is the life they want to live, so that like when I moved to Tacoma, Washington, I was consciously surrounding myself with people who had amazing, loving, long-term relationships and were astounding parents to me. And that helped me to see a different way, so I could start hearing that within myself, all those things that made me smaller became more quiet, so I could live more expansively. And I teach them that that voice of spirit will always expand you. It will not make you smaller. It will not make you better than anyone, more important than anyone, more smart than anybody else. It's going to teach you how to love, how to receive love, which I believe is the most courageous thing we can do, to really open ourselves and receive. So just starting to trust that voice and discern, is this the voice of spirit, or is this the voice of my ego or my culture or my parents, right? Those voices at times can be expansive and positive, but they can also be really contracting. So to watch that and to learn to go beyond the loud voices of parents, society, culture, religion. Those are very loud and kind of clamorous in us. They're kind of nonstop. And so I help people learn how to go underneath them to hear the quiet voice.
I know you also mentioned it is important to make an inner toolkit, and you include things like breathing exercises, mantras, affirmations, meditations. What are some of the mantras or affirmations that you personally use?
Well, I help people create their own mantra, and sometimes some of them say, I'm going to just use yours. And I'm like, that's great. Use it. And then eventually it might morph into something else that fits you even better. So I created a mantra for myself that initially, I bet I said that mantra inside myself or out loud 100 times a day because it was the mantra helps to create new neural pathways, so the inner critic isn't so loud because we have this new neural pathway that is going to affirm our goodness. So my mantra was and is, you are good, you are beautiful, you are holy. Step onto the path of your dream. You are good, you are beautiful, you are holy. Step onto the path of your dream.
I've heard a lot about like building those neural pathways because if you think about it, like with a dog, when like let's say they always run around the house in the back, you will be able to see where their path is because they always follow the same path. And if we're always thinking the same thing, we're going to have that same neural pathway. And I think that's why some people get stuck in depression is because they wake up and their first thoughts are negative and repeating. And we have to fight against those so hard. And it's so hard at first to build that new neural pathway of a new
Yes.
mantra rather than having the old one that you might not even realize was your mantra because you had adopted something that was not good. And you just think that's just part of who you are rather than recognizing that, you have a
Yeah.
negative mantra.
Yeah. And I encourage people to do a couple things with that voice that wake when they wake up in the morning and it's already criticizing them or limiting them, right? To just say, well, that's not true. And I'm doing this now. Or giving that voice a new job, right? That's trying to hold them back because that voice was honed and created from the need to be safe in times maybe where we really needed that. So it didn't come to hold us back, it came to protect us. But now we have to retrain that voice to protect us in ways that are helpful, not that are in the way. And the second thing I wanted to mention with this is that that voice, the catastrophic voice that happens to so many of us so often throughout the day. Angeles Arian, who's was a cultural anthropologist, taught me to say when I found myself listening to that voice and playing it over and over and creating these catastrophic images, like maybe my son was late coming home and I'm thinking, oh, he's been in an accident or he's in those kinds of things, to say to myself 3 times, that's a story that doesn't need to happen. That's a story that doesn't need to happen. That's a story that doesn't need to happen. And then imagining the best possible outcome, which would be him bounding in the house with excitement, telling me about his night and apologizing for being late. But, oh, mom, I was having so much fun, right? Now that's a healing story. Now that's a healing story. Now that's a healing story. And I use that still all the time. I've used it for decades, and it just helps to stop that whirling that we can create that gets in the way of our life, right?
One of the things that really resonated with me when I was reading about your own healing journey was that you say that you heard a speaker at a conference for adult children of alcoholics, and they said that
Yes.
your issues with your father will become your issues with your unhealed husband or son, and your unhealed issues with your mother will also become your issues with your wife and daughter. What impact did those words have on you, and how did that shape your healing journey?
Well, the fact that my unhealed issues with my dad would become the issues with a son or a husband, and the unhealed issues with my mom would become the issues with my daughter, I wanted a different kind of family life. And I knew the only way I could get there was to heal those. And so I was in my early 20s, again, like 23, 24, when I heard those words. And that catapulted my journey of healing, of transformation, because I wanted a loving home. I wanted a husband I could depend upon, who was not addicted to anything, who was loving and compassionate, who had his own spirituality, whatever that would be, that complemented mine so that we could share that together. And the number one thing I wanted in a father or in a husband was that he would be worthy to be the father of any children we would birth into the world, that he would be that he would be an amazing dad. And I've got to tell you, here it is, 40 years later. I have a 26-year-old son with my husband, Nico. We got married late in life. And their relationship brings me to tears often. And the good kind of tears of just, I did it. I did it. I am married to this amazing man he's not a perfect father. He's not a perfect parent or husband, but he's such a beautiful being. And neither my son nor I ever doubt that he loves us. Right? And so for me, I just recently said to him, we were talking about someone who I asked them, who was in their 90s, what are you most proud of in your life? And he was bringing up things from when he was a boy. Well, I was an altar boy and I was on the football team. And I know this person to be an incredible father and he was a police officer. He's done so many things in his life, and those weren't rising to the top. And after that conversation, as we were driving home, I said to my husband, if somebody asked me that question, my answer would be marrying you was the thing I was most proud of, because with you, the life I wanted, that all the possibility was there and it's manifest. And I just am so grateful that I have this life with you. Right? So that was a long answer time. Not even sure what the question was anymore.
I actually believe that as well, that you carry on the problems you have with a particular parent, and you bring that into, like, if it's your father, then you do bring it into your husband. And I got married when I was 21 years old, and I've been married for over 20 years now. And
Wow.
one thing that I realized very early on is one thing about my dad. I love my dad. He's a great dad, but his word is the final word. And so I always believed that my husband's word was the final word. And so I stayed silent. I did not use my voice. I stayed quiet because that was what I grew up with. And then I slowly just kept feeling smaller and smaller and smaller. And one of the things that I had told him once, or that he had told me once, is that he didn't like broccoli. And we were 21 years old when he told me this. So I was 39 years old and I was having a really hard time, and I was angry at him. And I said, you have taken so much away from me. I can't even make broccoli for dinner. And he was like, what in the world do you mean? You're like, you can't make broccoli? And I go, because you don't like it. And he goes, yeah, I do. And I was like, no, you told me when we first got married that you didn't like broccoli. And I took that because in my growing up household, that would have been set in stone. But in my new household, he was just stating a fact, sharing something that he didn't like broccoli. And I took that as I cannot make broccoli for him. And that was very enlightening when I realized I had taken so much of what his opinions were and thought that I had to live with those. I thought I took them on because I took my unhealed part of with my dad and I just put it on my husband, even though it was not part of my husband's meaning or intentions. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that your husband is going to take on what you're going to see them as you do.
Exactly. Yeah, you're going to be projecting that on to them.
One of the things I'm also very interested in that you do is legacy work. Could you explain what legacy work is?
So for me, legacy work is I walk with death as my companion, knowing that in any moment it could be my last breath. So a question I ask myself regularly is, if I were to die today, what would I regret I hadn't done? And of course, there's many things that might rise, but often there's one that's brighter, stronger than the others. And then I make a commitment to do that. The things that if I am gone, what do I want to leave behind for my husband and my son and my daughter of the heart and the world? What kind of life do I want to leave? So it helps to guide my life. And it also makes every day really precious. And because I asked that question, I have a minimum of 30 years worth of projects I still want to do. So it also makes me committed to living as long as possible and grasping, make sure every day that I'm grasping the sweetness or savoring it, not grasping it, and that I'm doing even 20 minutes towards a legacy piece.
Beautiful. I like that because I've kind of adopted something very similar. And I like the way that you put it because it puts it more into perspective. I like that. One of the things that you also talked about that is very important is recognizing our needs and like honoring them. In what ways do people not honor the needs that they have?
Well, just like you not eating broccoli for all those years, which is something you love, right? Because somebody says something, that, and it could be a husband, but it could also be, I remember as a child, one of my brother-in-laws said, "Oh, Ebert," which is my maiden name, "Ebert women can't sing." And I was like, "Oh." And I took that on just because he said that. He hadn't heard me sing, right? Ebert women can't sing. And so it took me decades to be like, I want to sing. So I took voice lessons and sang. I think anytime we hear that voice and we ignore it or say, that's not possible, I can't do that, we're ignoring it.
I see that you have the book behind you. Can you just bring it
Yes.
so we can see it? Are you able to grab it?
Sure.
Show it for us?
Yes, right here, Spirit and Grace. That's the little Nautilus Award. That makes me so happy.
Congratulations.
Thank
So,
you.
I do have a question for you about books. Aside from your own, if you could recommend a book that had a profound effect on you, in your own healing journey, what one would you recommend? If you have a couple, that's fine.
That's a really big question.
I should have prepared you for that one.
Yes. Oh, I'm just hitting a blank. I'm looking over at the bookshelf over there, but my favorite books are all downstairs. There's a book by Stephen Levine called A Year to Live. And he lived his life for a full year as if he was going to die at the end of the year. That really amplified my legacy work and my commitment to that. I read that probably 40 years ago. Some of Jean Houston's books, David Spangler's book, The Calling. There's so many. And one that I just want to say that helps, that I'm reading with my husband right now as piece of our legacy work, is The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning, which we have a 5-year goal to really clear our house of anything that isn't something we love or essential, so that when we pass, our son doesn't have all the excess to deal with because we've dealt with that. So to really clean it down to the essential things. So The Swedish Art of Death Cleaning is my current book. The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Yeah, those are just a few.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for being part of my podcast. There is one more question I do want to ask. And I want to ask, what is one thing that you would tell someone who is on their own healing journey, just beginning to realize that they need to start listening to that inner voice?
the same thing I say to myself. You are good. You are beautiful. You are holy. Step onto the path of your dream. You deserve it.
Thank you so much, Kim. I really appreciate it. And I also just want to thank my listeners for listening. And if you are interested in learning more, I have attached all of the links that we've talked about in the show notes, including for her book. I would also love it for if you were to rate my show. This not only tells my listeners that this is a show worth listening to, but it also brings this in my authors' books in front of more readers. Also, if you yes, and if you enjoyed this episode, you might also enjoy my episode with Debbie Weiss, who is the author of On Second Thought, Maybe I Can. Again, I had the privilege of speaking with Kim Colella. She's the author of Spirit Embraced, a guiding memoir for a life authentic and free. You can check her out in the show notes as well as at her website, spiritdoula.com. Thank you very much, Kim. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you for joining us at Authors Alcove, the Healing Place. We hope today's episode has touched your heart and offered you insights and inspiration for your own healing journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And remember, with noadays.com, you can take such courses as how to become a freelance writer, as well as how to become a proofreader and editor. Again, I am greatly appreciative of all those that support me through Patreon. Thank you so much. Please go there and show me some love. You can find both of these links in our show notes. You can also listen to our sister podcasts, Authors Alcove, The Writing Corner, where we talk everything about writing, publishing, and marketing, as well as Authors Alcove, The Reading Nook, where we talk about my favorite genres, fantasy, sci-fi, and the occasional horror. Until next time, keep healing, keep growing, and we'll meet again in the healing place.